now that we have all of our collage papers and they're painted with a layer of watercolor on each one, some may be solid colored, some may be multed with different colors, but we have our analogous color scheme laid out on those pages. We're going to be adding another layer of patterning and mark making to these today to make them a little bit more interesting, and I want to show you how we're going to do that. What we're going to do is create what I like to call a variation on a theme. You are going to pick a very, very simple repeating shape or line or mark, pattern, something like that, and then design several different variations of that. And we're going to be placing those patterns and designs on top of those collage papers to give them some added interest. So I wanted to start off by showing you can work with anything. You can use my examples if you would like to, or you can design your own. I encourage you to design your own because that'll be more inventive and more creative. But I want to show you how this works. Think of a very, very simplistic thing. Like in this example, I started off with some very small polka dots. And then I want you to think about how you can take something very simple, like some small polka dots, and make different variations of it. So changing it in some way to make it different, but still similar enough. And this is going to create harmony where things are similar, but still have interesting variety. So small polka dots, but what if I made them larger and more like ovals? But then what if I made them really large and gave them multiple outlines that were sort of very loose and abstract? What if I made them circles that varied in size, where they changed and shifted in scale? What if I made circles that overlapped in different ways? All of those are based on a very simple circular polka dot motif, but they're all each a little bit different, but they still are cohesive and kind of go together. Another example would be like this triangle motif, for example. I just started sketching in and doodling some loose triangles where one triangle fit next to another, and so on. But I can make a variation on that by drawing triangles that overlapped, or drawing a bunch of really small triangles that were clustered and very close together and then have them sort of fade out and disperse. I could make an alternating up, down rhythm pattern with triangles. I could create lines of triangles that change in size and scale and length. But all of those would be a very simple motif of triangles, but each one is a little bit different. I also like this one as well. What if I worked with just very simple lines? I could create patterns with very short hatching lines that start to twist and turn and create almost like ribbons of marks. I could create long, thin lines that ebbed and flowed up and down and in and out to create some really interesting organic, abstract lines. I could work with very short vertical lines, working with where they're more condensed and then further apart, longer and shorter. I could work with variations of dots and dashes to create some patterning. I could work with thick into thin lines to create some heavier visual weight where the lines are thicker, and then some much lighter visual weight where the lines are thinner or more spread out. All of those would be an example of a variation on lines. You could also create variations with very simple shapes. Since we're working with leaves, you could create motifs, variations on different types of leaves and branches. Or you could even use something as simple as letters, creating different types of letters. Regular letters, cursive letters, short, tall, block, sort of illegible cursive, stacked and turned where they almost become an abstract motif. Anything like that can work. So what I want you to do is practice on a scrap sheet of paper and decide what sort of a motif you want to use. of 5 different motifs that I could use built on like square and rectangular shapes. I started off with just creating some sort of a gridded kind of pattern, and then I thought, well, what if I make those squares small and overlap and have them sort of disperse and fade out? What if I made those squares more like where they were overlapping large frames where I could frame in different parts of the page? What if I created frames but incorporated small squares around to add the borders, to add some interesting variety? What if I use more of a grid format like this one, but what if I filled in some of the shapes with a darker value or a darker color? All of those are variations on a very simple theme, and you can decide which one you would like to use for your project today. So for my example today, I think I'm going to use the line variations on my different pages, and I'm going to show you some really fun ways that you can incorporate these different patterns and motifs and repeating shapes. So you should have all of your papers and they should be completely dry, and I'm just going to start. It doesn't really matter which page you work with to begin with, so I'm just going to grab one. And for this assignment today, you can use your watercolors to create this, or if you've got your colored pencils, you can use those as well, or you can also use a ballpoint pen or a permanent Sharpie. Now the Sharpie is going to be, the ultra fine point Sharpie is going to be a lot more bold. Either one, but these won't bleed and smear later on because we're going to be adding some glue and some more moisture, water, paint stuff on top of them. So you want to make sure that you test this out and make sure that it's a pen that's not going to smear if it gets wet again. Some pens will, like this Arteza pen, it will bleed. So you do just want to test it out before you start. So I'm just going to pick one of my patterns. I'll start with this one and create some interesting mark making on top. Start my next page and use a different kind of the mark making for my example, but try it out in watercolor this time. This paper has a lot of yellow orange on it, so I think I'll use my reds to give it nice contrast. I'm still going to make sure that I use the same color scheme, the analogous color scheme that I chose yesterday. See my finished pages now that they're dry, and I think they all look really nice together. They have some unity and they have some harmony in the shapes and the designs that I've made. They've got some similar qualities, but also they're different enough to each be unique. Some can be more simple and some can be more complex. This should be just a really fun, loose, abstract stage of the process. This should just be really fun pattern making. You can have it fill up part of the page or all of the page. It's really up to you to decide how you want this project to look. So have fun with it and really explore and just play with your materials.